Does it get any bigger? I think not. It's the Iron Bowl. That should be enough right there, regardless of the records, regardless of the standings, regardless of the implications outside of the rivalry. It's the Iron Bowl. And within the state of Alabama, there is nothing that trumps the Iron Bowl. And this is on the minds and the hearts of Alabama and Auburn fans, not one day a year, not 1 week a year, 365 days a year. But this year, as we have seen in the past, 2013, 2010 come to mind readily. This means a whole bunch more if you love college football. We bring in Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama. You can also join him on his show, The Way It Is, Fox 97.9, weekdays 2 to 4 Central Time. Stephen, how you doing tonight?
Doing well. Excited for Thanksgiving, but as always, get another chance to cover this Iron Bowl, which is going to be an intense one.
Aren't they all intense? You should know this rivalry just about.
I mean, they're all intense, but when you talk about intense with huge implications, I mean, there's intense, and then there's intense with bigger octaves.
All right.
So this is intense with bigger octaves.
Stephen, before we dive into this year's matchup, let's just take the Iron Bowl in and of itself, even if Alabama's, forbid me from saying, 6-4 and Auburn's 5-5. It means absolutely nothing toward a championship or the standings, but it is still the Iron Bowl. Can you talk about what makes this rivalry in a weekend of great rivalries? And this is what distinguishes college football from the other sports. Rivalry weekend, among other things. But this is it. And for the state of Alabama, this is it. This is the Iron Bowl. Just what are the nuances of this game that's separated from the rest?
I mean, just the fans, the pure passion of the fans. Like, crazy stuff happens in this rivalry, Mark, from a fan perspective. Yeah, you may have a fan that says, I'm going to slash your tires if your team beats me, or I'm going to egg your car if your team beats me, or, I'm going to divorce you if your team beats me. Well, in the Iron Bowl, that actually happens. I've seen tires get slashed. I've seen cars get egged. I've seen houses get toilet paper TP'd. I've seen husbands and wives that can't stay in the same room together. I've seen divorce papers get signed because, she's for Alabama and he's for Auburn and vice versa. So people really take this rivalry to the extreme, and then it gets even uglier on the recruiting side, Mark, because you have so many kids, whether you're from the Montgomery or Birmingham or Tuscaloosa or just different areas around Alabama, when it comes down to who do you sign with, whether Alabama or Auburn. And for a lot of these 4- and 5-star kids, you have your mom telling you, well, come to Alabama. You have your dad telling you, no, I'll go to Auburn. You have friends saying, come to Bama. You have other friends saying, go to Auburn. And you're just so discombobulated with what you want to do. And then the moment you make your choice, you have half of people saying, yes, you made the right move. Yes, yes, yes. And the other half's going, you idiot, you dummy. You went over there. You ain't going to play. You going to ride the bench. How in the world can you sit there and make that move to go? I mean, it's ugly. It has some ugly parts to it, from tires getting slashed and cars getting egged to the athletes involved, because if you go to one, the other is going to hate you.
So, Stephen, it's a great description by you, because I know, as a true blue college football fan, speaking to another true blue diehard college football fan, you can watch USC, UCLA. You can watch Washington State. You can go around the country. Ohio State, Michigan's about as big as any. Certainly in sports, not just college football, and you can appreciate them from a distance. But you've lived this one. You've gone to school. You've been surrounded and embedded in this rivalry. So you've got the perspective beyond what most of us can experience. I was down there covering Auburn and Alabama, specifically more Alabama, working in Mississippi, covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama was only about 45 minutes away, covering this rivalry from 1994 through 2000 for me, up close and personal, being on the sidelines of the games. And there's a number of things that come to mind. I could sit here all night, as you could, remembering games of yesteryear and the lore of this rivalry. Terry Bowden had an undefeated Auburn team in the first year of this rivalry that I was a part of, up close and personal, taking on a Gene Stallings team that was undefeated, that moved on to the SEC championship game and lost by 1 point to Florida, that derailed an undefeated season. That was a tremendous game. A little bit later in the series, a couple years later, Sean Alexander had some huge games in leading Alabama back to prominence after they had a couple down years and getting back to the SEC championship game. And of course, Tommy Tuberville left Ole Miss, which that certainly stuck in the craw of Rebel fans when he had burst onto the scene at Ole Miss, really saved a struggling program, a program that was near a death penalty on probation, brought them to respectability, and then kind of whisked away in the night by the Auburn administration to leave the Egg Bowl just minutes after losing an Egg Bowl to Mississippi State, and then signing the papers at Auburn, taking over that program. And Tommy Tuberville, probably one of the more underrated coaches in the SEC in recent times, had a huge and very successful run there at Auburn, and that was probably the end of the stay that I saw up close and personal with Auburn and Alabama. But anything that comes to mind, I'm sure you could go on and on through the ages and through the years, most recently, in terms of what you've experienced and what stands out to you about this rivalry that may be a little bit off the radar for the rest of us.
To me, what stands out the most in this rivalry are the players that compete in it. And some of those guys are very underrated guys. I go back to the 2015 Iron Bowl for just a moment, and I look at Alabama quarterback Jacob Coker. I mean, here's a guy that always wanted to play at Alabama, ends up going to Florida State, was not able to beat out Jameis Winston for that job, comes back to Alabama in 2014, loses out to Blake Sims. And for the next year, you're in the Iron Bowl at Jordan-Hare. And I know a lot of people look at that game and give Derrick Henry a ton of credit, which you should. He had over 200 yards rushing on I believe, 45 carries, an ungodly amount of carries for that man, but he was able to take it and keep rolling. But Jake Coker had some passes in that football game, one in particular where he evades Byron Coward and just lets go of a rocket downfield for a touchdown to Ardarius Stewart. It's just moments like that where you see a lot of these underrated kids that don't immediately pop out at you, catch your eye in these Iron Bowl matchups. And that's what I enjoy about it. I remember 2014 where I was at that Iron Bowl at Bryant-Denny, and Blake Sims came out, had a decent couple of drives, and then struggled with some interceptions. And there was a moment where Nick Saban goes to Jake Coker and says, "Hey, we may need you. Get ready, warm up." And Lane Kiffin goes to Saban and says, "Hey, we started with Blake. We're going to keep with Blake." And so Kiffin goes to Blake and whispers to Blake and says, "Hey, we got you. Go back out there." And Blake goes back out there and, my goodness, has a second half of the ages, had 4 touchdowns. Alabama wins a 55-44 shootout, and Blake Sims jumps into the student section, jumped into my area of the student section, and I had to crowd surf him up the rest of the aisle. So, just those guys that you don't always pay attention to seem to thrive in the Iron Bowl.
This is how good Auburn's been throughout the ages in challenging their what you would consider to be a little bit higher in status nationally. Certainly Alabama ranks as arguably the best program in college football history. It's 45-35 with Alabama leading the series. So Alabama has a comfortable lead by 10 games, but that's still a pretty hotly contested series. Consider if you went series to series, Alabama has a substantial lead in every series it plays across the SEC. Of course, for most more casual observers, the kick six comes to mind. That was historic in 2013 that sent Auburn to the national championship game. And, first, of course, to the SEC title game, but they disposed of Missouri, went on to play Jameis Winston and company, and for Alabama deprived them of a chance to get back to the national championship game. And just a few years prior to that, of course, in 2010, the huge comeback by Cam Newton, the comeback against Alabama, trailing 24-0, I believe was the score, and winning by a point in that game. That was a huge comeback at a time in which Auburn fans were thinking, okay, Alabama just won a national title. We're coming off a dismal season. When are we ever going to win a national title and catch up in this rivalry? And boom, a guy by the name of Cam Newton made it happen very quickly. You mentioned the 55-44 game. I believe that's the highest scoring total in the history of this series. In the last 2 years, Alabama's been substantially the better team. So they didn't blow out Auburn, but they had control of the game, and Auburn was in the game into the fourth quarter, where they had a fighting puncher's chance, but really wasn't able to do anything offensively to really stay in the game and make Alabama fans scared. 29-13 and 30-12 the last two seasons.